What do we do first? Be a MASH unit. From fellowshipofthemartyrs.com. Before we start trying to equip people, or even worship in spirit and in truth, we better be sure that we're all cleaned out, personally and collectively. You have to purify the temple first. The most common thing that I've seen in all my visiting different denominations is that almost universally there is a tendency toward putting on programs and ignoring the individual. The bigger the congregation, the greater the tendency. In reality, how that manifests always includes a statement about family and concern for the individual, but then it's offset and negated by the reality of a structure seemingly engineered to disregard individual needs. However unconscious this may be, the reality is clearly that millions of Christians are not walking in the fullness of Christ, or worse, walking around with massive oppressions that continue to go untreated. We really shouldn't even try to go dialing up people that have lots of open doorways. There are tons of people leaving the institutional churches, millions of them per year. Why? Because they don't feel like their individual needs are getting addressed. They may sit through a good sermon that has some life application, but they don't see or feel the radical transformation that should come as part of the normal Christian life. Or worse, they have a crisis or a need, and nobody in the church responds appropriately. We are not honoring God. We are singing and dancing and pretending everything is fine while people are bleeding to death in the pews, not to mention in the streets. Listen to me. God does not want you to praise and worship Him while you're ignoring the person sitting next to you who is having a crisis. It does not bring Him honor for you to raise your hands and tell Him how great He is while you fail to act like Him and heal those nearest to you. Heal them, or at least treat them, and then you can go on praising and worshiping and telling Him how great He is. He just does not want to hear you singing while you're ignoring people that are crying inside. Your prayers are going to bounce off of the brass over your head until you act like Jesus. Just knock it off, or else. He's not going to ignore their cries much longer. The church should be like the TV show MASH. If they're having a party, and someone shouts, "Choppers!" then the music stops and everybody rushes into action to do triage. That means rapidly identifying and categorizing the wounded based on needs. The bleeding, sucking chest wounds go first, then the broken legs, then the scratches. After everybody is treated and in recovery, then you can go back to your party. But what kind of hospital would you be if you let them bleed to death in the compound because you refused to stop singing and dancing because you had a schedule to keep? You planned for this party to take an hour and a half, and by golly, you're going to stay on time no matter what. The sick people can just wait until the show's over. Even when Jesus was right in the middle of a great sermon and had them all in the palm of His hand, if a paralyzed guy dropped down out of the roof, Jesus stopped talking and healed him. Mark 2, 1-12. Then He could go on with His sermon, and everybody was really impressed because of the miracle that had just happened in front of them. I'm not sure which would be the bigger miracle in some churches, that a paralytic rose and walked away, or that the pastor actually stopped in the middle of a sermon. The people of God need to be trained up in how to rapidly identify the physical, emotional, and spiritual warfare oppressing and killing their brethren, and then they need to be empowered to go and treat them on the spot. The music needs to stop until everybody in your camp is bandaged up. Church will not be the church until it stops being a show and starts being a hospital first and foremost. The reason it's not that now is because we abdicated to paid leadership to do all the work for us, and they can't possibly keep up. In fairness to us, many of them got to liking it and now don't trust the body to help them either. So it's a vicious cycle, but it's got to stop. The body has to learn to care for the body, whether or not there's a paid staffer. We need the gifts of discernment of spirits and word of knowledge and wisdom operating in force, and we need to get back to fulfilling the Great Commission. First, by cleaning up the messes in our own assemblies. Then, by going. We can't wait for them to come, because when we do, they're mostly not staying, and it's because they're not getting healed, which is because we're too busy talking and not actually acting like Jesus. If any of this stuff is convicting you, and you realize you played a part in sustaining an agenda that hasn't been working, or you ever ignored someone that was bleeding because you had your own agenda, now would be a good time to find a quiet place, hit your knees, and say you're sorry. Crying helps God know you're serious. You might also want to admit it publicly to the people affected. How are they ever going to learn how to repent really good if somebody doesn't show them how? Don't wait for somebody else to do it. It has to start with you. If you kneel down and repent and cry in front of them, it might just start a revival. Some of them have never seen anybody do that before. And if nothing else, it'll give them something new to gossip about. More on this from fellowshipofthemartyrs.com.